including the United States, found that Gazans are to blame for the explosion. That's because it was a rocket out of Gaza which failed and exploded in the hospital. Meanwhile, the Iranian regime is threatening Israel. On Tuesday night, Iran's foreign minister and the Iranian embassy in Syria both tweeted, "Time is up," directed at Israel. Just a few days ago, Iran already threatened Israel, saying terrorist organizations would open multiple fronts against Israel. On top of that, a former Pentagon official reportedly said this conflict could escalate to a nuclear war. That's if Iran manages to build a nuclear weapon. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Here to talk to us about this is Lee Smith. He's author of The Strong Horse, Power, Politics, and the Clash of Arab Civilizations, and he's host of Over the Target on Epic TV. Lee, thanks for being here.
Josh, thank you for inviting me on tonight to discuss this very interesting topic.
So, Lee, good idea, bad idea, what is it, to accept the Palestinian refugees?
It's mind-numbingly stupid, and it's actually hard to believe that former South Carolina governor, I live in South Carolina, Governor Nikki Haley would run this by, especially as a presidential candidate. I mean, it really indicates how incredibly far out of touch she is with the concerns of most Americans who have been worried, right, about Joe Biden's open borders now since Biden first went to the White House. But after seeing what happened in Gaza, what a violent incursion looks like, I mean, the fact that we have anywhere between, 4 to 10 million people who've crossed our border in the last 3 years, and we don't know who any of them are. And Nikki Haley saying we should take more people from this part of the world whose culture is responsible for the largest one-day massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. So that's just to round it off. That's what I mean by mind-numbingly stupid. And unfortunately, we have a pretty good sense of where ideas like this come from, right? It's not just Nikki Haley pulling it out of thin air. It's, of course, a very large class of donors to both parties, Republicans and Democrats, who are saying keep the borders open. We need cheap labor, and we need to keep depressing American labor. So for them, it makes no difference whether you're letting in terrorists or freedom-loving Middle Easterners. It just looks like more labor and wage depression.
So I'm curious your thoughts on this. The Jordan president is saying, or the king, saying they won't accept even a single refugee. I'm amazed. Egypt has one of the biggest border walls I've ever seen. They have one that makes even the Israel side look like a joke. It's huge. Egypt is saying they're not going to accept refugees. So why are Egypt and Jordan saying this? I mean, any thoughts on why that is?
Yeah, I'll give a little detail on this. I mean, first of all, Jordan, these are different Arab tribes than most of the ones that are in Gaza. They're more closely related to the Egyptians. Anyway, Jordan, look, I'm not excusing it, but that's their choice as a sovereign country. If they don't want to let in Gazans, that's up to them. I think it's totally fine. I don't think it's Arab solidarity to have to open up their borders and let in a whole bunch of different people. It's their call. As it turns out, no one has ever wanted Gaza, right? No one has ever wanted Gazans. The Egyptians didn't want it, right? You'll notice that in 1973, when the Israelis gave back the Sinai, the Egyptians didn't want Gaza, right? No one wants it. No one wants to deal with the different cultural problems and a place that's been seeded with violence now for decades. And the idea, again, that Nikki Haley and that other people, donors, Democratic officials, think it might be a good idea to bring Gazans to the United States is absolute lunacy. But apparently it's par for the course with what we're now seeing is a totally pathological ruling class, left and right.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Biden's kind of stuck in a difficult place, let's say. A lot of Democrats are pro-Palestine, and it seems part of the deal from Blinken's meetings with Muslim leaders is on the humanitarian side. I don't believe they care about Muslim human rights, otherwise they'd be criticizing the CCP for imprisoning and killing Uyghurs, but that's just me. But is there any way for them to do humanitarian work in Gaza without letting people flee? Like, how is Biden going to balance this, do you think?
Well, the United States of America gives an awful lot to Gaza. We give an awful lot to different UN organizations that pay for an awful lot of what goes into the West Bank as well as Gaza. So American taxpayers, whether they know it or not, well, you should all clap yourselves on the back because you're awfully generous people and you've done an awful lot for the Palestinians. So the question that we should all be asking is, why nonetheless do the Palestinians seem to hate the United States so much? All that we've done for them, not even all that we've given, but all the efforts that American policymakers have made over the years to bring peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And as it turns out, again and again, from Yasser Arafat to Ismail Haniyeh, the Palestinians say, no, all of you should die first. And in fact, will die first before we make peace with Israel. It's pretty disgusting and it's pretty discouraging. That's where we are. Americans are not to blame. Americans have done all they can, even more than they should have done.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Countries the U.S. says promote terrorism or pose potential national security threats. Migrants with this designation are subjected to stricter vetting and questioning after being apprehended. Last week, Border Patrol agents detained 2 Lebanese nationals in Eagle Pass, who are also considered special interest aliens. Agents have apprehended 19 Iranians and 17 Syrians since Monday in the separate Rio Grande Valley sector.
Florida Governor Ron
The BBC, if the King Charles can call the Hamas terrorists and also everybody else can call them terrorists, why can't the BBC? That's why we're here. My brother lives in Israel. He's spending most of his time in a shelter with his family. That's not a way to live. We want to live in peace. All we want is peace. Leave Israel alone and we'll be happy.
We're here outside the BBC to protest against BBC refusing to call Hamas terrorists terrorists and solely referring to them as militants. I think it's quite clear their despicable behaviour and the support they've summoned across the world completely warrants them to be known as terrorists rather than solely militants for the kind of despicable actions they've had.
I'm a Jewish student that studies in the UK. We haven't had a lot of support in Israel, especially in universities. So I'm just here to show my support for the Jewish and the Israeli community. I have a lot of family in Israel as well. So doing everything I can to show my